Welcome to Ghost Rider's Real Ghost Stories, where the supernatural meets reality. Join us as we delve into spine-chilling tales of ghosts, hauntings, and unexplained phenomena shared by real people. Get ready to question what you thought you knew about the world around you. Tonight's episodes include The Unexpected Passenger, Whispers in the Attic, and The Vanishing Truck Stop. Buckle up, because you're about to embark on a journey into the unknown. Let's get started. The Unexpected Passenger. In the 1990s, Julie, a resident of Portland, Oregon, was driving out of the city to meet friends when she found herself in a snarl of traffic. The setting sun cast long shadows across the highway, and the city lights began to flicker on, one by one. Julie, at 18, was no stranger to the unpredictable congestion of urban life, but this was different. The cars ahead crawled at a snail's pace, and a sense of unease began to settle in her gut. As she edged forward, the reason for the slowdown became horrifyingly clear. The twisted metal of a car wreck glinted in the dimming light, surrounded by the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt rubber and gasoline. Julie's heart pounded as she passed the scene, her eyes inadvertently drawn to the crumpled figure on the pavement, covered by a thin, white sheet. The weight of realization hit her hard. Someone had died. Barely a moment later, Julie felt a chill that ran deeper than the cooling evening air. She glanced to her right, and to her utter disbelief, saw a woman sitting in her passenger seat. The woman, dressed in work clothes smeared with dirt, stared at Julie with wide, terrified eyes. Despite the shock, Julie could see the woman's frantic confusion mirrored in her own heart. The woman looked like someone who had been abruptly and inexplicably transported into another world, Julie's car. Panicking, the woman demanded to know how she had gotten there and who Julie was. Her voice was high-pitched, almost hysterical, and Julie could see the raw fear etched into every line of her face. It was then that Julie noticed an eerie, ethereal quality about her unexpected passenger. The woman's presence seemed to waver, like a flickering candle, and Julie's blood ran cold as she realized that this was the same woman she had just seen covered by a sheet at the accident site. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," Julie said, trying to keep her own voice steady. "My name is Julie, and I'm here to help." She explained to the woman that she had been in a car accident and somehow ended up in Julie's car. The woman's face went pale, her eyes filling with a profound sadness and understanding. At that exact moment, they passed a clearing in the dense trees lining the highway. Golden rays of sunlight broke through the branches, casting a serene glow over the landscape. Julie, feeling an inexplicable calmness wash over her, encouraged the woman to find peace. The woman looked towards the sunlit path, her features softening as she seemed to comprehend Julie's words. With a final, grateful glance at Julie, she stepped out of the car and walked towards the light. As she did, her figure gradually faded until she disappeared completely. Julie pulled over, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. The rational part of her mind fought to dismiss what had just happened as a figment of her imagination. But the lingering sense of peace and the profound experience was hard to shake off. Several days later, Julie's conviction was put to the test when a news report caught her attention. The story recounted a trucker injured in a car accident. As the report neared its end, a photograph of a woman flashed on the screen, the same woman who had mysteriously appeared in Julie's car. The news anchor solemnly explained that she had died in the accident. It was unbelievable. It was too much, Julie shared later on the Monsters Among Us podcast. The experience left her forever changed, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Whispers in the attic. Before Reddit.com, user Digsdoors got down to recounting their scariest of ghost stories about living in a place that was obviously teeming with honest-to-goodness members of the spiritual world. They pointed out the irony of ghost stories that begin with the phrase, "I don't believe in ghosts, but..." After all, no matter how a ghost story begins, it always hinges on the notion that, come on, of course we believe in ghosts. A few years ago, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia, the writer recalled. It was my first time living on my own. The apartment block had been built in the 1930s. I'd been there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom. I noticed something unusual. A wooden board that had once sealed a hole in the ceiling, leading to a small attic space, was now broken into two pieces on the floor. I examined the pieces. The board was an inch thick, and it would have taken Bruce Lee to break it. I thought the landlord had sent someone to work on the attic. It was at that moment I heard a rustling sound and a giggle. I was frozen stiff with fear. Someone is up there for sure, I thought. I emailed pictures to the landlord, asking if anyone had been there, with an undertone of annoyance since she hadn't warned me. Her reply read, "Please call me as soon as you can." I called, and she explained that her last two tenants had said the same thing happened. She promised to replace the board, and she did. A month later, I woke up one night around 4 a.m. My body was covered in goosebumps. It felt like someone was rubbing his or her hands on me. Everything was silent, but then I heard a dragging sound coming from above my bed. It was as if someone were pulling a sack of potatoes. I froze, convinced someone was up there. There is no way an animal could make that sound. After 5 minutes, I worked up the courage to turn on the light, armed myself with a cricket bat, and walked to the bathroom. That's when I saw the new board covering the hole was broken in two. I felt sick. The dragging sound had stopped, but I heard something else. Whispering. The sound was clear and coming from the attic. It sounded like children's voices, and I could hear one sentence repeated over and over. "It's your turn. It's your turn." I switched on every light in the apartment to make things feel normal. It was 5 a.m. and dark outside. I watched TV to try to unwind. Then a fuse blew. My pet budgie, Dexter, whom I kept in the kitchen, usually never made a sound at night, but he started squawking like he was being strangled. I'd never heard him make those sorts of noises. He was screaming, which terrified me more. I grabbed my car keys, ran out, sat in my car, and waited there until the sun came up. When I saw people walking their dogs, this comforted me enough to go back in. The front door was open, but I figured I might have forgotten to close it when I ran out. I went to the kitchen to check on Dexter, but he wasn't in his cage. I felt sick again. All my windows were closed, so I looked everywhere inside. When I walked to the bathroom, I heard splashing. Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I took him out, washed him, and dried him. I was so confused. At 8 a.m., I called the landlord and gave her a watered-down version of the night. "Oh wow, you heard the whispering too," she said. I stayed in that apartment for another 18 months. I heard the whispering on a few occasions, and twice the board covering the hole in the ceiling moved. Although I live elsewhere now, the landlord recently called. She said that her new tenants had begged to speak with me about some of the stuff that's been going on there. Forget it. It's their problem now. The Vanishing truck stop. On his way to get married, a military man and his best man set off on an 800-mile road trip from Camp Lejeune in North Carolina to Lafayette, Indiana. It's 1 a.m. on a cold January night in 2014, and the man tells monsters among us that the weather is bad, with temperatures in the negative double digits. The icy wind howled through the barren trees lining the road, their skeletal branches swaying ominously. Snowflakes danced in the headlights, creating a hypnotic tunnel of white. As the pair close in on Indianapolis, they discover they have no money to pay for gas to refuel the car and are about to run out. The empty highway stretched ahead, disappearing into the snowy darkness, with no signs of civilization in sight. Growing up in the trucking industry with my dad, I decided to stop at a truck stop, the man explains. But because the main interstates were shut down due to the weather, they had to get off the highway and search for a truck stop along the back roads instead. The narrow roads wound through desolate fields and past abandoned barns, their dilapidated structures looming like ghosts from a bygone era. We found a smaller truck stop. It had one truck, and it was just kind of strange. It was just a blacked-out truck with a blacked-out trailer. There were no real markings on it, nothing distinguishable, he says. The truck stop itself seemed like a relic, with faded signage and a flickering neon light casting eerie shadows. They went in, hoping a clerk or waitress would spot them a few dollars for gas, enough to make it to Indianapolis, at which time they'd go to the bank, take out cash, and pay back the loan. The interior of the diner was surprisingly well kept, with checkered floors and vinyl booths that looked as though they belonged to another era. A warm glow emanated from the overhead lights, contrasting sharply with the cold, dark night outside. Inside, they found a tidy diner, occupied by a waitress, cook, and a lone truck driver. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, providing a comforting counterpoint to the harsh weather outside. I went inside, talked to this driver, and he bought us a cup of coffee. We sat there and talked for about 30 minutes about what was going on and why we were headed, where we were, and what we were doing, and he gave us $20 for gas. I went outside, pumped our gas, came back in, and I told him, "Hey, I really appreciate it. I'll be back." The conversation was warm and friendly, the driver sharing stories of the road that felt oddly timeless. Making good on his word, the man got cash from the bank upon arriving in Indianapolis and returned to the diner. The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty streets, melting the night's frost. When we arrive at about 10 o'clock in the morning, it's boarded up, he says. It looks like it's been abandoned for years and the truck's gone, but we had just been in there. The once warm and inviting diner now appeared cold and lifeless, with boarded-up windows and a padlocked door. They pull in anyway and find a police officer parked in the lot. They explain what happened just hours before, to which the cop chuckles and replies, "Oh, you met the ghost of 3. So, 2 military members converse, had a cup of coffee with, interacted with, 3 people at a diner that had a fuel pump. I got $20 worth of gas," says the man. "When I came back, it had been boarded up for, if I remember correctly. The cop said it had been boarded up for the last 25 years. The officer's words hung in the air, the implications chilling them more than the winter cold ever could. Thank you for joining us on Ghost Rider's Real Ghost Stories. If tonight's tales have left you with chills, make sure to tune in again for our next episode. Remember, the world is full of mysteries, and the supernatural waits for no one. Could the next story be even more terrifying? Join us every Wednesday and Sunday as we dive deeper into the unknown. Until then, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet dreams.